it would be hard to begin today by saying anything except Happy Mother's Day. Because today is the day that we take time to honor all that mothers do on behalf of their children. That selfless love that they bring to the table year after year as they carry the bound-up heartache of those around them in hope when so many others find it difficult to see just beyond their own personal pain. Who are these people? Well, I can tell you that long before the age of social influencers and social media, these mothers were the real influencers. Unlike the influencers of today, however, they were never in it to get the most hits or to make the most money from ad revenues. And they were the ones that figuratively laid down their lives for their friends and family, day after day after day. I know that story well. My own mother died during brain surgery and was well on her way to the morgue when she sat up. It scared the heck out of the orderly that was pushing her. But my mother spoke of the experience of God, telling her her time wasn't up, that she had work yet to do. With prayer and with rejoicing, she determined that she was healed so that she could shepherd Christian children into the world. And the doctor said, well, that isn't likely, if it's even possible. You're too old for that. Well, there was another woman that had a lot to say about that in the Bible, too. Many tries later, I was born. Premature, tiny, considered unlikely to survive at such a meager weight. Nearly twice as big as our little granddaughter was born this past summer. But that's okay. It's much more common now. Doctors don't freak out nearly as much. But during all that time, my mother's hope and confidence never failed. Back in that day, it was common for most people to smoke. And she had quit smoking before her pregnancy, and she was determined to stay home from work, even though it might mean living on less as a family. But having been given new hope and new life, it was her fervent mission to raise Christian children. I almost had a baby sister, but that was too much to ask of a woman that was now in her mid-40s and a brain tumor survivor. I remember we had picked out a name, but never got to use it. But what I can remember from the balance of my childhood was how she was constantly ready to set aside her own wants and desires to serve others. Her family, her friends, people in the church. And it's just that. Not just my mother, but all of our mothers that we collectively celebrate each year on Mother's Day. The stories, of course, vary from person to person, but the theme never seems to waver much. So if you have a chance to do so, it is a great time to say thank you to the one in the family who is so often called on to bring forth order from amidst chaos. They may be remembered as the one with that special talent for finding that missing sock, or knowing just what to say when the end of the world comes just before prom. Not to mention all the wisdom imparted to help us with those little necessities needed to survive life away from home in our first apartments, whether for college or employment. You know, all those things that we had forever taken for granted? We won't need to cook. Yeah. Cleaning? Nah, that's for somebody else. So yes, happy Mother's Day. Thank you for laying down your life for us day after day after day. And even for those who do not share the experience of the vast majority of us, I direct your attention to the others that often seem to epitomize the heart of mothers. People like the soldiers and sailors, pilots and air crews, not to mention all the support crews. All who place their lives on the line that others might rest in their security. All who have served in these roles know the thankless nights on watch, ready to sound the alarm. And the same is also true for so many of our first responders, as we've been reminded this past year. More than essential, these are the selfless who continue to risk much that we might be kept safe from an ever-present danger. And how many of these people are mothers all at the same time? None of this, of course, is meant to deny that not all mothers live fully into the picture of motherhood, and that not all women even have the opportunity to become mothers. For those that are mothers and struggle, some are struggling against high expectations and a limiting circumstance. Some don't have the opportunity to be what we would like to call exceptional, because on a day-to-day basis, they struggle just to maintain. But no matter what example we're looking for and at, we realize that most of the examples that we see are of grace and inform so much of us, and so many of us, what it means to live fully into the life of Jesus Christ. But there are others as well that we have to think about today. When we think about the unusual or the uncommon case, how about those mothers who live with the premature loss of their children? Who will thank them and help them to encounter grace sufficient to carry on in the face of what has to be one of the worst kinds of loss imaginable to us? Who speaks to and for them? And what about those without children for a whole host of reasons? Mother's Day is a cultural event here in the United States, and yes, absolutely yes, we're not talking about worshiping mothers. Worship is instead reserved for Jesus, who literally laid down his life that we might live. But we do take time to not only regard the positive experiences of motherhood, but also to examine our celebrations in the face of these less common situations. And we can do this from a theological perspective. We ask how our celebration of mothers celebrates Christ, how it honors Christ, how it inspires others to live as Christ lived. In John chapter 15, verse 12, once again, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Maybe the corollary to the greatest commandments, to love God and to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, with our whole beings. That selfless, lay down your life for another kind of love. What the Greeks called agape love. The love that caused Dietrich Bonhoeffer to risk life and limb for his fellows in World War II Germany. Not only his fellows, but for his whole country. He was here in the United States, safe, away from all the tragedy that was happening. And he couldn't stay because he believed that God would have him stand for those who couldn't stand for themselves. When you think about what kind of influencer you'd like to be, this is it. This is the kind of thing that a mother ought to do, or a father for that matter. How about a teacher, or a pastor, or a caregiver, or even a practitioner? Love one another. In my personal experience, a mother's love is right up there near the top. But certainly no greater than Jesus' love. You know, I think about my teenage years, and I know that my mother had to be a saint. If she knew just half of the things that I got away with when I was on my motorcycle, how she could have quietly held her breath, I can't imagine. But whether it's my stories or your stories, the love is the same. The events change, the elements vary. But as much as it's an amazing example of what life and love should be, it's even more important that we do like they did and place their eyes firmly on Jesus as we place our eyes firmly on Jesus. Because in Jesus there's no dimension where we might question if we're still loved. As disciples of Jesus, we learn the same lessons that were learned 2,000 years ago. We learn that loving is who we are. Loving is a way of living that's continually ready to lay down our lives for those we love. Loving honors God's commandments. And loving honors those who have loved us, as well as those who continue to do so. Because loving is a product of our discipleship and of the love that we've already received. So whether we've learned it from our mothers or our fathers, our sisters or our brothers, friends or family, adopted family, love is what we've been made for. But But even if from none of these, we know that we've been loved by God in the definitive, sacrificial act of loving. Which means that all the loving we were able to do is a response to that original love. We've already been loved. And all we can do is to respond. So why not respond with more loving? Today, tomorrow, as far as we can imagine into the future, with even greater love. Amen.